Welcome back to another topic, designing materials for grammar lessons. You may be wondering what is it that we should focus on when we teach grammar. Right, there are two schools of thought here. One is when you teach grammar as discrete items. Um, you can take the analogy of making a pizza and assembling the ingredients on pizza. So the discrete items would be the individual ingredients that is required to assemble that pizza. So if you know each one of it, then you can actually put it onto the base and create the pizza. So in terms of grammar, the discrete items would be the parts of speech. So if you learn all the different parts of speech, you should be able to assemble or structure them appropriately into a sentence, right? The other school of thought is that you look at the pizza as a whole, all right, and discrete chunks from that whole pizza rather than discrete items. All right. So this would be like some parts of speech put together into clauses, for example, or phrases, rather than going at word level and identifying the parts of speech of those words. We look at the whole structure and break it down into chunks, into meaningful chunks. Having the discrete items and discrete chunks in mind, let's consider two factors when we look for materials to teach grammar. Right, the two factors would be the A factor or the appropriacy factor, and the E factor, which is the efficiency factor. Right, so for the A factor, what would be the elements that we should consider? Well, the first one is age. So, what would be the right material for certain age of students? For example, if they are young learners, what would be appropriate? If they are teenagers, what would be appropriate? And then we also need to consider the level of proficiency, the class size, because sometimes certain materials um, could be in the form of a poster or something, which may not be appropriate for a large class because they can't see the poster clearly. But if you have the same materials turn into handouts, then it would be appropriate for the bigger class because each one would have um, the material and they can refer to it, right? And then we also need to consider whether English is the first language, second, or third language, right? And what would be the first language if English is not the first language? So, how would we teach grammar in that sense, right? The needs of the students should also be considered, their interests. Sometimes we take it for granted that boys would like sports, but not necessarily. In some classes, you might find there are lots of boys and they are very interested in fashion or cooking, and those would be the kind of topics for most of your activities, uh, it, so that you can attract their attention. And finally, the availability of materials or resources that needs to be um, thought about because that would help us to ensure that the materials are appropriate for that class. Right. Besides the A factor, we have the efficiency factor or the E factor, which can be divided widely into three areas: the economy and ease, as well as efficacy. So, what is economy? You should be economical with your instructions, with your words, because too many words and too much of explanation can confuse the students. And be economical with planning and resources as well. Don't plan too many things for a short period of a class. And the resources don't have too many because sometimes it may not be used, right? The second one is ease. Make it easy on yourself. Do not burden yourself, right? At the end of the day, you are the one who's teaching, so you have to make sure that you are comfortable with it. All right. And don't forget your students, they should also be comfortable with the materials that you use. So setting up the activities, setting up the materials should be easy for you, right? And the third one is efficacy. So what is efficacy? You could go by these three questions. Were the students aroused with the activity? Did it gain their attention? Right? Were they able to recall the information conveyed, especially at the end of the class? Could they recall? So that can help us understand about their understanding of the topic as well as the memory, what has been retained. And the third question is, were the activities able to motivate students with or without the assistance of external motivation? So if you don't have an external factor, were the activities themselves a motivational factor for the students, right? That they were interested in learning. They didn't need you to tell them to do many things. Well, the teaching materials are chosen by three factors: purpose, format, and the creator. So let's look at each one. What is meant by purpose? All right. So are you using that material for instructional purpose or is it for authentic purpose? So it could be for either one of these purposes. Next is the format, first being the paper based. So do you want a paper based type of material, or an audio-visual type of material, or an electronic type of material? So the internet materials would come under electronic as well as audio-visual. While the creator, the factor for choosing the teaching materials, would be either by commercial companies or an in-house creator. So what is meant by in-house is your own department or your school, uh, you sit together and create the materials for your classes. So this would be more customized. Material selection is also based on the basic principles of second language acquisition. The first one, materials should achieve impact, some noticeable effects on learners. For example, curiosity, interest, and attention are attracted. Impact can be achieved through novelty, variety, attractive presentation, and appealing content. Materials should help learners feel at ease and also help learners to develop confidence. Besides that, what is being taught should be perceived by learners as relevant and useful. Materials should require and facilitate learner self investment. Learners must be ready to acquire the points being taught. Materials should expose the learners to language in authentic use, and learners' attention should be drawn to linguistic features of the input. Materials should provide the learners with opportunities to use the target language to achieve communicative purposes. Materials should take into account that the positive effects of instruction are usually delayed. Materials should also take into account that learners differ in learning styles as well as affective attitudes. Other than that, materials should permit a silent period at the beginning of instruction. Materials should maximize learning potential by encouraging intellectual, aesthetic, and emotional involvement, which stimulates both right and left brain activities. Materials should not rely too much on controlled practice, and materials should provide opportunities for outcome feedback.